Justice with Judge Mablean will be life, because in everything we do, it involves the law. You came to court to testify about what you heard, what you saw, and what you know.
She's fair.
I don't have a hearing problem. This ear works good. This one works even better.
She's firm.
I'm not responsible for that ticket, and I'm not going to pay for it.
Who says you're not going to pay for it? I make that decision, not you.
She's honest.
What you have to say?
All I have to
Nothing.
say.
This is Justice with Judge Mablean. Terry Dennis is suing Rodney Graves in the amount of $4,000. Ms. Dennis claims Mr. Graves gave away all of her belongings in her apartment after she was sent to jail. Mr. Graves claims he didn't receive rent payments from the plaintiff and that the property was abandoned.
In the matter of Terry Dennis versus Rodney Graves, Ms. Dennis, you're suing him for $4,000 for your possessions that the landlord removed from your apartment. And Mr. Graves, you're countersuing for $1,000 for back rent?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so tell me what happened.
Okay, Your Honor, it all started 2 years ago when I rent an apartment from Mr. Graves here. Everything was fine. I liked the apartment. It was good for a while. He even said that I was a good client. I kept my apartment clean. He got the rent on time every month. Then I got into a little trouble. I got arrested because of my off and on ex-boyfriend. I got arrested because he wanted me to stash some drugs, cocaine. Now, it was against my better judgment. I've never been...
I don't care. You got arrested. Go on.
So I got arrested, called the landlord, told him everything that was going on. January, I was arrested.
Okay.
I paid the rent before I got arrested. I paid it...
For January or December?
January.
What did you tell him?
I told him I got arrested, told him what happened. I told him that I had this, the bill was $50,000. Couldn't pay that, so the month I was in jail, because I couldn't pay the bail, I was talking to my lawyer. So finally
Now, what did you tell him? I'm arrested, bail is $50,000, I can't get out? That's what you told Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Okay. All right, go on.
So a month I've been in jail, talking to my lawyer about the situation, and since I'd never had a criminal record before in my entire life, and this charge was basically bogus, he said the only thing for me to do is plead guilty and get a plea bargain. So did that.
So if you pled guilty, what was the sentence?
Well, the sentence was a year.
Okay.
In jail. So I had to figure out what I was going to do about my apartment. So I told him about it. He's like, well, you have either you could find someone to move into the apartment to take up your lease, or you could move your things out.
How many more months were remaining on the lease?
6 months.
Okay, what'd you do?
So I was trying to find a friend of mine. I knew she was having problems with her family. I knew she wanted to move out, so I told her about the place, told her how nice it was and everything. She said, well, yes, I'm gonna take over the lease. So I said, fine. Then at that point, I got in touch with Mr. Graves, told him, I got a friend.
What month is this? February, March, April?
February.
Okay.
Called Mr. Graves, gave him the information and everything. A week later, he sends me a letter saying that my friend never showed up. She never showed up to look at the apartment.
Okay, so your friend is a no-show, so now it's February, your items are still there. What up?
I said, well, can you give me more time? He's like, sure, whatever amount of time that you need. Great.
No, he didn't say whatever amount of time that you need. I know he didn't say that.
Well, he didn't say
you
he
get
didn't say he was going to give me 5 more months or a couple of days. He just...
I didn't get the rent till the 28th of the month for February, Your Honor.
So you got the rent February 28th?
Yes, for the month of February.
Okay, and then what happened?
That's basically the last day of the month, Your Honor.
But it's still February, and if you accepted it, it pays for February.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
yes,
so
Your
then
Honor.
what happened?
So now it's March, and we had a phone conversation about either we have to break the lease or she has to start paying the rent. Well, she's in jail. I know she's not going to be able to pay the rent. So she asked if she could have a few more days, a little bit more time to get her stuff out. So I said, well, I can give you a few more days, but if someone comes in with money and the credit report to get the rent, I am going to have to move the stuff and lease it to a new tenant.
Okay, so what happened?
So I waited until about the 20th of March And then finally, my cousin had contacted me, and he was ready to move in, and he had the first month's deposit plus the rent.
Your Honor, I did talk to my sister about paying the rent.
And did she pay it?
Yeah, she mailed him a check, but it was late. But
That
he
was
still,
the
but he still
February
got,
rent,
he still got the check.
Okay. So he's
Still got
saying
it.
your sister mailed the check, but that was your February rent, which he received February 28th.
Well, I did talk to him and told him that I was gonna. I didn't have enough money for me to pay the March rent, and then get a storage, and then get people to help me move. So I did tell him, I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna move out. I'm gonna just try and get my stuff out.
Right. That's what he said. March 20th comes, your stuff is still there, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
So now you found a tenant who's willing and able to pay the rent.
Yes, and so we loaded it up, all her apartment. It took almost all day, and a lot of stuff went into the trash, and the rest I dropped off at Goodwill.
Coming up on Justice with Judge Mablean.
So you took some of her clothes to Goodwill, you threw some of it out.
We threw some of it out.
And later,
The three of us went over the same story. I told them my side of what happened. No one believed me, and I was fired from that day.
Justice with Judge Mablean. If you'll be in the Los Angeles area and want to bring your case to court, call 1-888-552-6878. You're watching Justice with Judge Mablean. We're back with the case of Terry Dennis, who is suing Rodney Graves for property loss.
Okay, now you got to tell me what stuff you loaded up and what stuff you dropped off at Goodwill.
There was a lot of just trash, just stuff that we were just going to throw out. Newspapers, magazines, a lot of dirty clothes, stuff like that. Stuff in the closet that looked like it was halfway decent, we took to Goodwill. The appliances.
So you
like-
decided what was decent and what wasn't.
Yes,
So you took some of her clothes to Goodwill, you threw some of it out.
we threw some of it out.
And who told you to decide what's good and what's not?
I just used my own judgment, Your Honor.
okay,
I've
so
been
it was
a
clothing, what
landlord
else?
for a long time.
What else?
Clothing, the appliances, like a blender,
So what about furniture?
all that stuff. The bedding and the dressers went to Goodwill. The chairs and couches in the living room, they didn't look like they went to the dump, to the
So you
Yeah.
dumped
dumpster.
those. Be quiet, Miss Dennis. What about, was there a kitchen or dining room furniture?
There was, that went to Goodwill as well.
Okay. All right. And you did this March 20th when your cousin came with the money?
It was probably the 22nd or so, but
All right.
I sent her a letter on the 20th, Your Honor.
And when you sent the letter on the 20th, what did you tell her?
Well, actually, I take that back. I didn't send her a letter. I put the letter under her door.
All right. Okay. Now, when did you get out?
A few months later,
So why are you charging her $1,000?
For the month's rent of March.
You said you agreed she could break the lease in February.
I did.
So if you agree she could break it, now how you gonna come back in here and charge her?
I'm just countersuing her because she's going after me for...
Oh, you just trying to get, okay, this is a tit for tat, but that's not the way the law works. So if you agree to break the lease, then you can't sue her for the lease because you had an agreement. Okay, but you agreed to allow her to get her things out time. She didn't get them out timely. Now you're within your rights to remove her items and put them in storage. Not to decide what's good, what's not, what can be thrown away, what should go to Goodwill. That's not your decision to make.
At my expense, Your Honor?
That's the law, baby, at your expense. You can charge her for that expense, but you have to do it at your expense for at least 30 days. I don't think all your clothing and furniture and stuff is worth $4,000 unless you can give me some proof.
I have the receipts right here, Your Honor, and everything
Well, the
that
receipts
was...
of when you bought it, furniture
Yes.
loses value as soon as it goes out the door.
What,
Soon as you walk out the door with it, the value is
well,
gone.
this is the receipt of when I bought it and how much...
Yeah, let me see. Because when you buy it, the value is gone real quick. And clothing lose value as soon as you walk out the store. Well, when you bought all this living room and armchair and couch and coffee table and dining table, you paid $1,600 for it, but I don't see a date on it. It's when you purchased it. How long had you had this stuff?
I've had it for a few months, 4 months.
$1,600, $1,230 for the mattress and the bedroom and set. So that's about $2,900. Nah, you don't even have $4,000. You didn't even pay $4,000 for the stuff. You added the other money for clothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'd be willing to give you about 25% of the value. $1,600 and $1,230 is $2,800 about, and then your clothing maybe $500. When you say a whole bunch of clothing over the years, how are you? How old are you?
32.
Yeah, you may have had $500 worth of clothes if you sold them to Goodwill. But I give you about one-fourth of the value of your furnishings. So, for $2,800, that's $700, and about $300 for clothing. So, $1,000. And you asking her for $1,000 rent, but you're not entitled to her rent back because you agreed to break the lease. So, judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $1,000. The defendant's request for $1,000 is denied. That's the vote.
Judge Mablean has ruled in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant has been ordered to pay $1,000.
I didn't move your stuff because I thought you were a bad tenant. I moved it because I just needed someone to pay rent in the apartment.
Well, I'm glad I won some of the money. Now I can replace some of my things.
Coming up.
The three of us went over the same story. I told them my side of what happened. No one believed me, and I was fired from that day.
Justice with Judge Mablean. You're watching Justice with Judge Mablean. Kyle Lewis is suing Edward Ramos in the amount of $5,000. Mr. Lewis claims Mr. Ramos fired him even though he did what his supervisor instructed him to do. Mr. Ramos claims he suffered a loss because of the plaintiff's actions and says he had to make an example out of him.
In the matter of Kyle Lewis versus Edward Ramos, Mr. Lewis, you allege that you were unlawfully terminated and you've lost the ability to earn wages as a result of that, and you're suing for $5,000.
Yes, that's correct.
And the defendant is alleging that you did something wrong at his place of business and the termination was justifiable and lawful. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me hear from you, Mr. Lewis.
That's Your Honor. So I've been working for Mr. Ramos's logistics and supply company for about 3 years now. It was my first job out of high school. I'm basically a warehouse technician. What we do is we supply supplies, tools, any type of miscellaneous equipment for construction companies. So I'm a warehouse technician, so I receive and just process shipments as they come into the facility. Like I said, I've been doing this for 3 years now. I was named Employee of the Month 2 times. Even the first time was within 2 months of my employment. So I really take this job seriously. So on this particular day, it was about 4 months ago, a shipment came in. And what we do is we take the pallets, we load them up, and we bring them inside the facility. And they're housed inside of cages. Every single pallet is linked to a cage number. On the particular day, I went to the pallet, I checked the inventory, made sure everything was there. When I went inside to see the cage happened to be filled up. This is something that happens often. Some things
What do you mean filled up?
There are some other supplies, the shipment from the previous night. The overnight crew, they didn't clear the cage out for the morning shift.
There's only one cage?
The cages are linked to the pallet. So this number cage was filled up. And this particular cage was actually filled with hazardous materials. I've only been on the job for 3 years. I'm not certified to touch those things. So when I found that out, I went direct to my supervisor, and I let him know that the cage was filled. And he told me to just take the pallet and move it close to the door of the building, which I did. And he said, don't worry about it. He would call the night manager, and they would have the night crew come clean up the cage. So the rest of the day, I just went about my business. Otherwise, after I moved the pallet close to the door, I went back inside the facility, helped out other employees. I was unpacking boxes all day long. I come in every day at 8 a.m. I take a 1 p.m. lunch, and I clock at 5 o'clock every single day. So it was kind of near the end of the day, my shift, and the pallet was still outside the facility, and the cage was also still filled up. Is it outside the
facility? It's not even inside the gate?
No, Your Honor. It's still outside. So as the day was ending, and it was still outside, and the cage was still filled, I was looking for my supervisor. I couldn't find him, so I went ahead and I texted him. I reached out to him. I actually have the text messages here. In the text message, you can see I let him know that they were still there. I was getting ready to head home. I asked him, what do you want me to do with them? He told me to just leave them right where they were at and have a good night. So I did just like he said, and I left. The next morning, I came back to work, 8 o'clock, as I always check in. I was working about 2.5 hours, and then my supervisor came over to me. He was extremely flustered, asking me where the pallet was. I told him exactly where I left it after he told me in his text message, just leave outside the building. He got extremely upset with me at that point in time. And brought me into Ed's office. He's the owner of the business. The three of us went over the same story. I told them my side of what happened. No one believed me, and I was fired from that day.
Coming up,
And then when I got back the second day, I noticed that the pallet was actually outside.
you're watching Justice with Judge Mablean. We're back with the case of Kyle Lewis, who is suing Edward Ramos for lost wages.
All right, let me hear from you, Mr. Ramos.
I am the owner of the logistics, and I've been having the company for about 10 years already. Actually, that day, I was out of town, and when my supervisor informed me that there was a few items stolen from my pallet. That pallet cost me like $2,600. Like I say, I wasn't there, but he's my supervisor.
So that's who I should talk to. Come on
Yes.
up here, Mr. Overbrook.
Hello.
You can have a seat, Mr. Ramos.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me what happened.
Hello. So on the day of the event, I just got a text from Kyle telling me that, the pallet that was supposed to move into the warehouse, that there was no space for him to move it into.
What time did you get that text?
I think around 11 a.m.
All right. And
And
then
then-
what did you tell him to do?
I told him to leave it exactly where it was, and I told him that I would call the previous manager and have him tell somebody from his shift to arrange what they were supposed to move because...
The night shift.
Right, correct.
Uh-huh.
So then I got a text from Kyle again when he was going back home to that...
At the end of the workday.
Right, right.
Uh-huh.
And then he told me that he's done with whatever he had to do that day, and the pallet was still outside. What did I want him to do?
And what'd you tell him?
I told him to move it close to the door. And then when I got back the second day, I noticed that the pallet was actually outside of the building, not anywhere close to the warehouse door.
Judge Mablean's verdict when Justice with Judge Mablean returns. You're watching Justice with Judge Mablean.
Your statement to him. 5 o'clock. I'm leaving. I couldn't find you. I finished putting away the boxes downstairs. I went back upstairs to finish moving the pallet, but the stuff was still in the cage. What do you want me to do with the pallet? That's his question.
Right.
Your answer. Just leave it near the door. I will have the night crew take care of it since they did not clean out the cage in the first place.
Right.
So it seems like to me the fault lies with either his miscommunication with the night crew or the night crew failed to take care of it since it was their fault in the first place. But you put it all on him and fired him. So judgment for the plaintiff, give the man his money until he finds a job.
Judge Mablean has ruled in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to pay $5,000.
Be sure to make sure the pallet was secure.
Listen, don't blame me for the miscommunications by the manager of your company.
This has been a production of Entertainment